Hey everybody, this is Think Global, and this is the October edition of this podcast. And John, here we are. It's the fall of the year, and it was crispy this morning here in Colorado.
I'm loving it.
Yeah.
I'm loving it.
Yeah.
So
Actually,
hard to sit in this little podcast studio and not be outside.
Okay, right. Well, okay. Anyway, outside it's going to be 84 today, and yes, it's going to be a beautiful day. Crispy, cool nights, warm days. Like, this is the time of the year when I want to push the pause button on life. Like, because I know snow and winter is coming, but right now, I want to thoroughly enjoy every day.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, it is a good time. All right. Hey, folks, we are going to continue talking about the book we looked at and talked about last time, Right Thing, Right Now by Ryan Holiday. And again, if you haven't picked up a copy or if you haven't downloaded an Audible edition of that, we would encourage you to do that because he has a lot of great short chapters, like 6 to 7 minutes read or listen, that just, I think, speaks volumes to us and what we need.
Yeah. I'll tell you, so the last episode, we covered 2 chapters called Be Decent and Be Loyal.
Mm-hmm.
And over the last month, I have found myself repeating those lessons in my brain, especially around be decent.
Yes.
Like, things happen in traffic. Things happen when you're waiting in line at the grocery store and you want to lose your patience, or things happen in marriages and things happen with friendships but just been thinking about that of be decent.
Right.
And so I learned something just from our own little podcast, and it's helped me, I think, maybe be a better human as I go throughout life.
That's right. And that's, again, not that you're going to agree with everything in the book, but it's a good book just to be challenged by it. And again, so many historical facts, so many stories from people in the past who just lived out these character qualities that I personally find it very inspiring. Right Thing, Right Now. 2 more chapters today, and then we'll probably jump to a different topic in November. All right, so let's just pause for a moment. All right, think about the world we're in right now. Like, I just came back from a part of the world where there's intense warfare. In a country separate, but so much happening in the Middle East. All the news, media, were on the brink of a massive, almost a cataclysmic kind of event. People are losing their lives. People's homes are being destroyed. Children losing parents, and parents are losing children. Just a lot going on there. While I was there, in that part of the world, we have a hurricane that comes through our part of the world. And the hurricane is just devastating, and especially in parts inland. And so much going on. And like, there's this overload of news, it seems right now, about just bad news, tough things, hard things going on. So today, we're going to talk about 2 chapters that actually relate to that. The first chapter, which I love the chapter title, and that is this: See How the Other Half Lives. I mean, basically, see how everybody else lives. See how the other half, like, a lot of us who are, maybe those who are listening to this podcast, you and I, our lives are pretty chill. We go to work, we do our things. Yeah, we face crises, we face challenges, but the other half, man, they're going through a lot right now, and there's a lot of challenges. So let's just talk for a moment about that chapter and just how it applies to our lives and relates to our lives, and that is, see how the other half lives.
Yeah. So there's a quote from that'll kind of paint the picture of what that's all about. And you can pick up on it just from the title, See How the Other Half Lives. But the quote is this: the problem is that it's so easy to stay in our bubbles, to not see what we don't want to see.
That's right.
And that's what we do. We stay insulated in our bubble. And we've talked in the past on other podcasts of not being overly consumed by news media, which is true. You can go down you can swing the pendulum too far the other side. Right. And that's all you do is consume media that shows you what the plight of the world and what's happening in the world. But there is some value in getting out of your bubble and seeing, empathizing, learning how to empathize with how other people live and how their realities of life.
Yeah.
So, which I want to pause and go back in time
Yes.
and tell the story of. So we've been privileged to work in Lebanon for a number of years, and everybody knows what's happening in the news around Lebanon right now. But I think what started our work in Lebanon was this chapter right here.
Right.
We had a chance to see how the other half lives, and we quite literally couldn't turn our back on it. We knew we had to be a part of it.
Right.
So why don't you just tell a little bit of what we saw, why we're even in Lebanon to begin with all these years?
Yeah.
Because I think it's this chapter.
Right. Actually, it took place on a trip that we had where we visited Lebanon and went to the Bekaa Valley, which is it borders right up against Syria. So like if you're standing in this small town, you can look at a mountain, and right over the mountain is Syria. And ISIS was around at that time. And so you had literally almost 2 million Syrians who fled to Lebanon for safety. Now, all of a sudden, people had lost lives, people had lost limbs, families had been destroyed. Children were now without education. And I remember the thought that we had, and as we looked and visited with these kids and saw these tent camps of refugees, it was like, how do you see this and not do something about it? Mm-hmm. And so that really was the impetus of seeing how the crisis, seeing it firsthand, and saying, you know what, we can do something about this. We ought to do something, even though it feels like a drop in the bucket. Doing something, which is, by the way, another chapter of this book, Do the Small Thing. Because when you see 2 million refugees, like, what are you going to do about that? Like, the UN can't even handle that. But what if we were able just to teach 100, 200, 500 children out of all of those and make a small difference in the lives of people? We'll get to that at the end, but that was the impetus. We saw how the other half lives.
Yeah.
So I think, John, just to get to the point of what Ryan Holiday is after is that we have our struggles, we have our problems, but what happens is we become so consumed with ourselves, that bubble that we live in. We become so consumed with our little world, the busyness of our world, the agendas and the things that we have to do every day of the week. And then on the weekends, we're tired and we want to rest, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We just basically have stopped thinking about everybody else, and we've become people who simply think about ourselves.
Yeah,
and that's what this is all about. Like, see how the other half lives. Anyway, so the whole idea that this relates to here is let's think globally.
Yeah,
like let's think nationally. Like, there are people hurting in this country. There are people hurting globally. And by the way, I would say again, I always like going back to parents, like, what if parents helped their children develop empathy for the world? Like, not everybody gets 3 square meals a day. Not everybody gets a new pair of jeans and a cool t-shirt. Not everybody has a mom and dad to go home to. And to help our children understand that, and to see that the world that they're living in is sure different than how the other half lives. And by the way, how the other half lives, it's all around us.
Yeah.
It could be down the street. It could be in a town next door to us. How the other half lives is significant for us.
Yeah. How do you take this into consideration and not become overwhelmed? I mean, the world is nuts right now. Our own backyard is nuts.
Right.
Like, how do you not become overwhelmed by seeing how the other half lives?
Right. Well, actually, because we had people in Lebanon, and because of the crisis now, it was overwhelming, right? Like, I would wake up in the mornings, what's the news release? I'd go to bed at night, what's the news release? Like, are they safe? Are they not? What should we do? And so your life becomes consumed with it. And for seasons, I think you should be consumed with it, because maybe you have people you're responsible for there, or maybe there's a great concern we should have. But I do think there's a measure in which we have to put boundaries on how not to be consumed with it, because that could leave us in just a puddle. Like, a mess. And then we're so absorbed in that we can't even live our own lives. So I think there is that balance. And some people can go that direction. I would say probably the greatest challenge we have is how do we not be so absorbed in ourselves that we don't see how others are struggling right now, how the other half lives. So anyway.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think the other problem is more the problem, like we're so self-consumed with our own lives and issues. But if someone were to listen to this and say, yeah, I want to see how the other half lives, you can easily become overwhelmed in that because there is a lot going on.
Right.
But I think that leads us maybe to the next chapter.
Before we get there,
okay,
just
go
a couple
ahead.
of thoughts.
Go ahead.
Especially this. I think it was yesterday morning. I was up early as I was thinking about this, and I thought, when we think about how the other half lives, sometimes we don't do it because we love to choose sides. We love to choose sides based on our nationality, on our politics, on racial issues, social issues, economic issues, position and power. And so often we get comfortable in where we fit. And so I think that's the challenge for us is how do we get outside of that? How do we intentionally look to see how the other half lives? So anyway, that leads us to the next subject, which is
we have to help.
We have to help.
Yeah. So
Right.
I think to just look at it and be like, oh, well, that's so horrible. And you empathize with it. Well, their lives are so horrible. I can't imagine that being in my life. But to rather look at it and say, okay, but how can we help?
Yeah.
And again, that can become overwhelming. Like you mentioned, the 2 million refugees, for example. But what if you can make a difference in the lives of just a handful? Or you look at this hurricane, devastated Western North Carolina, Eastern Tennessee, and various parts up and down the far East Coast. Well, what if we could provide one care package for a community?
Yeah.
But if 100,000 people provide one care package for a community,
Oh,
we've really made a difference.
Oh yeah. It feels like a splash in the ocean.
Yeah.
But when enough people care, that's when we can make a difference.
Yeah.
I like what he said in this chapter. He said, there is no such thing as neutrality in a world where evil exists. Like, you just can't be neutral. Either you ignore it or you do something about it. And again, it's not just the big things, but it's just a practice of life that someone else could use an encouraging word. Someone else could use just a note of appreciation or encouragement. Someone else is in a place where they need someone just to be with them, like the power of presence. Someone else may need you to provide a meal. And so that's the idea of not trying to stay neutral, because neutrality is impossible in that. Either we ignore it or we do something about it. And so I really appreciated that about his, not shrugging our shoulders at what really is going on and saying, I can't do anything about it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of like that quote from Dietrich Bonhoeffer, which is quoted in this book, I believe. But silence in the face of evil is itself evil. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. And Bonhoeffer was heavily involved in World War II and what was happening with the Holocaust and the Jews and all that. And that's kind of where that's coming from.
Right.
To not speak out against Hitler was to actually speak. But how does that apply in our day as well? The things that we see, the atrocities that we see, or the natural disasters that we see, to not act is to act. Is to say, maybe it's to say, I don't care.
Right. Yeah. There's another quote in the book, again, as I was listening to it again, from JFK, when he said, evil wins when good men do nothing, which is so true. Like, evil wins when we just don't step up to do the right thing and to do something about it. And to, after considering, how the other half lives and not doing something about it, we really are ignoring reality, and we're ignoring something that we can actually help with. And so some of the thoughts I had was these, we could say that pain and suffering will persist if we do not seek to offer a helping hand. Like, we just ignore it. We remain neutral, and we refuse to do something about it by not even offering a hand to help in the process. What I noted also is, in essence, to love others as we love ourselves, to love our enemies, to take stock in how we tend to be self-absorbed, to see how too often we are so busy in our own worlds, too focused on self that we simply have little to no time to serve, to help, to rescue others, to love others. That's what this book, and I actually think these 2 chapters are challenging us with, is not to be so self-absorbed that we can't actually offer a helping hand. By the way, this is a personal argument. When we actually help others, when we actually do something to help, it does a world of good for ourselves. Like, it's something significant takes place in our hearts and in our minds when we do something to offer a helping hand in a world that is actually hurting the other half and how they're living. And I think that's a great trait to pass on to others. And I think this is something that could be contagious with others as they see what we do and how we love and how we care and how we provide. It's good for our children to see that modeled in our homes. So anyway, good chapter.
No, I think that's really good. I mean, I think there's probably a lot of science behind it. Maybe we should have done the research, but the same is true when you're generous, right? When you generously give of your finances to people, they, obviously we say it's better to give than to receive for that reason. Like it does something to your heart, but the same way to give of your time, to give of your resources, to help people in need.
Right.
I think there's actually scientific proof that like it fires certain things in your brain. It does certain things in your heart. You actually legitimately feel better when you give more than you receive.
Yeah, generosity.
And so I think this is a different take on generosity. Sometimes we think about money or whatever. We've done a whole podcast on this, I think. But the same is true here. Like when you lend a hand to help.
Right.
Yes, there's sacrifice involved. It's probably not going to be fun. A lot of cases, it may not even be safe.
Yeah.
But the benefit, you could actually make an argument it's more selfish
right. Oh, yeah.
than anything else. Like there's a selfish benefit when you lend a hand to help people or do something for others in need. And so, I mean, I think just real practically, like I remember last Christmas, a group of friends of mine, we kind of got together and we wanted to go, this sounds so cheesy. I can't believe I'm telling this story. We went and sang Christmas carols at a nursing home.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, because I'm human, I'll be honest on this podcast, I was kind of dreading it. I was like, I don't want to go do that. I'm kind of embarrassed. I don't like to sing. But even now, like almost a year later, I think of that night and I'm like, that was so fun. Like the conversations I had with the people in that nursing home, the camaraderie that I built with my friend group, like we did something tangible to help people who maybe felt lonely or didn't have family around or who wanted to celebrate the holiday but didn't have somebody to help them celebrate the holiday. And for us to go in for an hour and sing Christmas carols put a smile on their faces. And like to think that I was dreading it before going, that's kind of what maybe is more embarrassing. Because now I look back on it, I'm like, that was so cool.
Yeah. Actually, you were taking in consideration the other half, how the other half lives.
Yeah.
And that meant something to those people.
Yeah.
So and that's actually the small things we could do. Hey, can I quote myself? I'm going to quote myself because I jotted this down yesterday. I like it. This will not always be fun. It may not be safe, nor will it always bring the applause of others. It may not be the popular thing to do. Usually, it will not take place in the spotlight. Therefore, the whole thing is, what's my motivation?
Yeah.
Like, we may not get the applause of people. We probably won't be in the spotlight. It may not be safe. When I think about our team working on the border of Syria, and they were there during what's happening now in Lebanon, like it may not be safe to do the things that care for other people. And so, anyway, but we're still called to do it. It's what I think. I think it's what we as people do because we value the dignity of others and the fact that they're image bearers. So anyway,
so can we get really practical?
Yes.
What can we do? I mean, yes, somebody might say, wow, that's so inspiring. I want to go live on the border of Syria. Awesome. Like, that's fantastic. But most people are just going to listen to this and say, hey, I get that.
Yep.
I want to be more observant of how the other half live. And if I can help, I want to help. But how can we get practical? What are some practical ways to apply this?
Right. And I would say for everybody, like, I love his next chapter. And his next chapter is start small. So here it is, like he says, like, see how the other half lives, do something about it. And then he says, start small. Like, I think some people want to tackle the impossible. The biggest thing is the greatest challenges around the globe. Well, most of us will never be in a position to do something about that.
Mhm.
So his whole thing is start small. So, just to summarize what he says in that chapter, seek to do what you can. If it's in you, don't try to do the impossible, but at least do something. Like, as that stirs in our heart, just try to do something. Look for the needs around us. By the way, everybody has a need. There are people out there that just need something. And so start small. Begin to see how, as humans, we should be doing this with others. And so the practical thing is we just take a small step in the right direction. Even if it is, like going back to the last podcast, you're sitting down at a meal at a restaurant, a word of encouragement to the person who's taking care of you.
Yeah.
Like, you never know what they're going through. Try to think of what they're going through, how the other half lives. So I think that's the best advice, and that is just to simply look at the small things that we can do, something that's within our power, our scope, to either give or to serve or to love or to care, or offer a prayer.
Yeah.
Just start small.
Yeah. And I think we underestimate the power of a word of encouragement, like you said, or a word of kindness to people, because like you just said, you never know what people are going through. And so it doesn't have to be that you organize a truckload of stuff to go over to North Carolina to help the communities in need. You might contribute to that.
Right.
I know one church over there, they have an Amazon wish list. You can buy things and ship it to the church, and it helps the community. That's great. Do that. Maybe find the cheapest thing on the list and buy it. Like, whatever. But it might be a word of encouragement to somebody.
Right.
It might just be a word of kindness.
Right.
And if, like we were talking about, drops in the ocean, if we all offered words of kindness to the people around us, it would change the world.
Oh yeah. All right, let's land this plane.
Land it.
We're going to land it with one of his quotes from Take Small Steps.
Okay.
Start small. All right. Here it is. Did you not know, or did you just not care to know? We can't fix what we won't face. I like that. Like, again, did you not know that someone had a need? Or did you just not care to know? We can't fix what we won't face. So I guess the call is, let's face the realities.
Yeah.
There are people, another half, living differently.
Yeah.
There are those who need expressions of love or care or service or sacrifice. Do we not know that? Or do we not want to face that reality? So we can't fix it. We can't help if we don't open our eyes to see what's going on. Anyway, with that, John, how about you wrap it up, man?
That's good. That's awesome. I mean, that brings up whole other thoughts around courage and all of that, but we'll talk about that another day.
Yeah.
All right. This is the Think Global podcast. That was the October edition. We'll see you guys back here in November. And this is Think Global, where the world is our home. Strangers become friends and friends become family.
All righty.